Hey there, it's Kate. Welcome back to my channel. I wanted to talk today about the reading that I've done this week, but before I do, let me acknowledge that I haven't done any preparation for this video. I was not expecting to have time today during nap time. I don't normally get a time when both kids are asleep at the same time, which is why you can probably hear our lovely ambient music in the background from the baby monitor. Hopefully it's only music that comes through the monitor while I film this. But that's kind of what's going on, so let's just get into it and hopefully we can get this filmed today. So I read a little this week. I finished a couple books. I started a couple books, kind of dipped my toes into a few books, and then I also decided not to finish a few books this week, so we'll start with those. The first book that I decided not to finish right now was What Happened by Hilary Clinton, and I opted not to finish it right now because I'm reading it on my Kindle app on my iPhone while I'm nursing, and it just is kind of an emotional read, and it wasn't conducive to the atmosphere in which I was reading it. So I decided to put that one down until another date. Not surprisingly, probably to anybody, this, which is called The Faith of the Faithless, Experiments in Political Theology by Simon Critchley, which is an academic philosophical monograph. I decided that this one is probably over my head, definitely for this point in my life when I'm very sleep deprived. So while it was interesting and the part of the introduction that I understood was great, the rest of the introduction kept increasingly referencing these philosophical texts from like the 13th century that I had never heard of before, and I'd thought that that was probably not where my brain power was best utilized right now. So I put this one down as well. The final book that I decided not to continue with, that I'd gotten reasonably far in, is Deep Work by Newport. And so this one is controversial for me, even in my own head. So the premise of the book is that there is this type of work that is called deep work, and it's work that is best done by oneself without distractions for a long period of time, and that it is inherently more valuable to society than its counterpart, which would be shallow work. And for me, it was that last part of the argument that was really making me angry and making me not want to read the book, because that part of the argument is inherently, well, wrong, because, hi, I'd rather have someone who is able to fix my plumbing or fix my wiring or lay asphalt to make roads than someone who can think of mathematical theorems, right? And okay, so his counter argument would be that someone had to come up with all those things in the first place, and I get that, but you still need people who are actually working and actually laboring. And in particular, like, not only that, but you still need women to do work that is inherently quote unquote shallow work. Like, even the wording I don't like because it privileges deep work and makes shallow work sound like such a negative thing. But like women's work, typically women's work, keeping house, watching children, teaching, things like that, which are traditionally thought of as women's work, are not considered deep, right? Because there's something that like is inherently full of distractions, and therefore according to his argument, that's somehow less valuable than the work that I did when I was in academia and I was working on a dissertation in history. And that to me is like the fundamental problem of academia and one of the main reasons why I left. So reading the book was bringing up all those negative old feelings, and I decided to put it down, and now that I've talked about it, I'm going to put it up on a shelf way up there where I don't have to look at it and it won't make me mad anymore. On the flip side, though, I probably would recommend that my husband read it, because in his work in tech, like, I could see the applications. So there's that. Whew, so those are the books that I decided not to read. Those are the books that I am reading currently, and then I'll do the ones that I finished at the end. That sounds like a good order. So War and Peace, read a little bit more of that. There's not much to talk about because I'm reading it very slowly, and that's okay. I started reading Positive Discipline. I like to always have a parenting book kind of on the go, and so I have like 5 or 6 parenting books that I'm about halfway through, because I find that just even like dipping into parenting books, as long as I do it on a regular basis, helps like keep my mind focused on trying to be a good parent, which is something that I strive for. So this is this week's, at least for now. And then I started All Things Shining. This is the subtitle is Reading the Western Classics to Find Meaning in a Secular Age, and that's by Hubert Dreyfus, and some name which is obscured by the library sticker, Sean Dorrance Kelly. I should have known Kelly. This book is like The Faith of the Faithless, kind of, in that it's about secularism and kind of coming to terms with secularism and in a modern era, but much more accessible. So I'm excited to get into this more as bedtime hopefully starts to happen soon and I can read more at night. And then the final physical book that I was reading was Rainer Maria Wilke's Book of Hours, which is a book of poetry, and I was reading this out loud to the baby last week while her sister was napping, and that was really fun and kind of a way for me to get through a time that's normally sometimes frustrating, because there's like the toddler entertains the baby quite often, and so when the toddler is napping, the baby's not entertained and everyone is unhappy. So reading some of this helped both of us have a better nap time. So that was wonderful. And then, the final book that I'm reading on my Kindle right now is Shelter by Jung Yun, and I just kind of started it. I'm less than 15% in. I will say that the beginning of that book is not a great book to read right before bed. That was the mistake that I made last night. So I can't really tell you too much more about it, other than there's an incredible amount of it's kind of implied violence. You see the aftermath of violence in the beginning of the book, and I definitely had some weird dreams after reading that. And then finally, the 2 books that I finished, and I'm going to link them down below because I want to make sure that I get the authors' names correct. So especially for this first one, I finished City of Brass. I think S.A. Chakraborty is the author, but I'm going to make sure to get that right down below. And I love this. So this is a newly released fantasy novel that takes place in the Middle East and is based off of Middle Eastern folklore. And it kind of takes place, I believe it's the turn of the 20th century. So it's really a unique setting, and the characters were lovely, and the plot was interesting, and I had the biggest book hangover after I finished that book. I wanted to go back into that world, and I wanted to go back into the lives of the characters, and it didn't help that it ended on a huge cliffhanger, because there's going to be 2 more books, but I highly recommend it. It's a great book. And then finally, I finished yesterday The Stranger by Albert Camus, an Algerian author. A short 120-page book about a man who, the blurb says, a man who witnesses a murder on the beach, and I'm not quite sure how accurate that description is, but we'll go with it. And it's an existentialist novel, apparently, so it's very much like a thinking novel, and it's about this man, something happens to him, and he's thinking about kind of what has led up to it and then what comes after. And there's a lot of thought about life and death and the meaning of both, which is interesting to read. And I picked it up because I was watching you can tell that I didn't do any preparation for this. I was watching a author talk by the author of Reputations, which is a book that I reviewed on this channel last year, and I will link that down below with the author's name that, of course, I'm having a hard time remembering right now. And he was talking about that book, Reputations, and saying that he had wanted it to be a book that was easy to read but hard to understand. And The Stranger was another of those type of books that were easy to read and hard to understand. And so I've kind of made it a point to try to pick up some more of those types of books from the library, and some more of those that he recommended, and I will report back on those later. So that's everything that I read this week. Please let me know if you have read any of these, or if you want to read any of these, or if you have any other thoughts. And like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.